comfortably zoned with the Zigzag Man in Alameda, California, pushing on the doors of life marked pull and fighting the unholy trinity as we go. Big business, organized religion, and government.
We are back. Golenbock University. I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And the man, the myth, the legend is with us today, Peter Golenbock. How are you, sir?
I am just fine. Could not be better, in fact. A beautiful day in St. Petersburg. It was in the 90s. It didn't rain. Fabulous, fabulous day.
Did you get to see a ball game today?
I certainly did. Went to the Trop to see the Rays play against the Seattle Mariners. The Mariners were winning 5-4 in the bottom of the ninth. We managed to get a runner on first base, and with 2 outs, one of our hitters hit a pop-up behind the infield and in front of the outfielders. And Johnny Fields, who was on first, goes running around second and goes running towards third, and our third base coach basically doesn't tell him what to do. So Johnny Fields comes slowing into third base, at which point the third base coach tells him, "Get going home." And off he goes, and the throw beats him by 10 feet. If he had been motoring hard and not stopped, he might have made it, might have tied the score. But the Rays have, their base running is just terrible for some reason. Malice Smith has gotten thrown out at third perhaps 5 times. They're kids, but their base running is terrible. I think their third base coach needs to have a talking to.
Yeah, sometimes.
No, we lost. We lost the game 5-4, which was very, very disheartening, but not bad because it's baseball and it's wonderful anyway.
Okay. We were talking a little off the air. I've got the A's in my backyard, and they're not they're not the Mets to me, but they've really grown on me. And because of our friendship, I watch the Rays, and the A's and the Rays in so many different ways parallel each other, if not for the ballpark uncertainty.
True.
Bring us up to date a little bit about the ballpark situation in
St. Petersburg and Tampa?
Right.
Well, they announced a year ago, the mayor of St. Petersburg gave the team permission to look outside of St. Petersburg, which was very controversial because the thought was that if he didn't do that, they'd have to be in St. Petersburg. But the other thought was if you didn't let them do that, then they would move to some other place, Las Vegas, Montreal, Mexico City, who knows where.
Right.
So they let them move to Tampa. And after looking through Tampa, they decided that they would move to a 20-acre spot in Ybor City, which is on the edge of Tampa, which is where the Cuban population used to make cigars. The only problem is that St. Petersburg and Pinellas County have put away $400 million for a new ballpark in Pinellas County. And Pinellas County is where St. Petersburg is.
Mm-hmm.
Hillsborough County, which is where Tampa is, has said that they are not going to spend 10 cents for a new ballpark for the Rays. So the Rays have until December 31st to make their deal with Hillsborough County and Tampa. And if they don't make it by the 31st of December, then the agreement with St. Petersburg to look elsewhere will have gone away. So it's complicated in a way because the Rays don't seem to be getting anywhere. So I just don't know what is going to happen. Stu Sternberg, who was the owner of the Rays, isn't happy with St. Petersburg because the attendance isn't very good. But the attendance isn't very good in large part because the people of St. Petersburg are not happy with Stu Sternberg. So it sort of works both ways. So once they announced that the team was moving to Tampa, we were getting 18,000, 19,000 people per game. Once they made that decision, I'd say a third of the St. Petersburg fans decided, well, screw you, I'm not going to the games anymore. So now we're getting 10,000, 11,000, 12,000 people per game here in St. Petersburg, and the attendance stinks. But it's not entirely the fans' fault. A large percentage of the fault.
Is part of it the ballpark and the...
No, the ballpark is fine. There is absolutely nothing wrong with the ballpark. The ballpark is old. I mean, the ballpark was made in 1986. The team moved there in 1998. So for 12, 13 years, there was a ballpark without a team. But once the team moved in, they've spent, $30, $40 million fixing up the ballpark. The ballpark's lovely. The problem is...
Was it built as an indoor ballpark originally?
Yeah. No, it's built with a dome. It's got a dome. It's not retractable like Miami. It's not retractable like Toronto. It's just, when it rains, you stay dry. It's 72 degrees every moment. It's a perfectly comfortable, wonderful place to watch a ball game. Every seat is a great seat. There's not a bad seat in the place. About once a month, a hit ball hits one of the girders up there, and the New York critics scream bloody murder. Oh, how can you play in a ballpark where the ball can hit the girder? But like I said, it's once a month. I mean, and the fact of the matter is if he hits it in fair territory, if it's in fair territory and comes down, the player could catch it. And if he doesn't catch it, it's in play. And the last girder, if it hits it, it's a home run. But that's, a monster of a shot to hit something like that. So it's really no big deal at all. But for some reason, the Franceses of the world and that little snake who does the show with him, that snivelly character, what's his name? They're always complaining about the trop. So
okay, you don't like that guy. I can't think of his name right now.
Yeah, I can't think of his name either.
There's a whole bunch.
He's got an ESPN show. Mike and the Mad Dog. Mad Dog Russo, I guess his name is Russo.
Christopher Russo.
Christopher Russo. Yes.
He also has a show on MLB Network.
Well, good for him.
In the morning, yes, but.
Well, he's one of those screamers. The idea now on sports talk show is that you scream, and sometimes you get two guys who scream at each other. ESPN got rid of most of their really wonderful people, the Keith Olbermanns of the world. That one fellow who wrote that great book about basketball, they got rid of him. They were paying them huge sums of money, and they're all gone. And now they got two guys they put on the show to scream at each other, and they think that that's great television. And maybe it is. Maybe it's something that the millennials like, but it's certainly not my cup of tea.
Right, nor mine. That's why you and I never scream at each other.
Nothing to scream about.
We get is angry. I have to bite my tongue, but I don't scream. And I appreciate you not screaming at me.
You're welcome.
Okay. I would like you, as we talked about off air a little bit, first to tell us about the book you're writing, and it's called Malice.
It is.
I think it's complete. Am I correct?
Yeah, no, it's certainly complete. It has been written.
And who published it? Where can it be?
Well, nobody has published it. That is the thing. Nobody has published it. Everybody is afraid of getting sued. Exactly why they're afraid of getting sued, I'm not sure. But that's what they say. They're afraid of getting sued. It's sort of a contest between a woman who was a trainer at the University of Tennessee who was sexually abused by Peyton Manning back in the 80s. And that would have stopped right there, except what happened was when Peyton Manning was going to go from his junior year to his senior year, basically he said to the university, I'll come back my senior year if you get rid of this woman. And so they did. They got rid of her. She went off to work at the University of Florida Southern University in Lakeland, Florida is where she went. And the word got out about what Peyton had done. And as a result of that, a lot of the newspaper people and some of the professors at the University of Tennessee were writing that Peyton Manning should not win the Heisman Trophy. And in fact, he did not. And there was a defensive back from Michigan, Charles, and I wish I could remember his last name right now, but everybody listening will know who he is. So Charles from Michigan ended up winning the Heisman Trophy, one of the very first defensive backs to ever win a Heisman Trophy. And what happened then was that Peyton Manning's father, Archie, who used to be a star in the NFL, was so angry at this woman that he and Peyton wrote a book and said some of the most malicious, horrible things about her. And then what they did is they took the pieces of the book that were about her and mailed those pieces to the important people at Florida Southern University with the purpose of getting her fired. And in fact, that happened. I mean, it's just disgraceful. So she decided that she would tell her story, and she's telling that story.
Okay, you're writing with her, in other words.
I am indeed. I am writing her story. Yes.
Okay. May I ask, was Peyton accused? Was he brought up on charges?
No, he was not brought up on charges. They had a legal battle. I mean, they've actually had 3 legal battles, where the first time she won something like $300,000 from the university for being sexually abused. And then she had another legal battle over suing he and his father for maligning her, for defaming her in that book. And once again, she won a large sum of money for that.
Now, does she collect, or do they protest? Do they protest it, or
no? They came together with an agreement, and she got paid.
Oh, okay. This didn't go to court, but it was an agreement.
It's an administrative process because court is so damn expensive.
Right. Now, what possessed father and son to write a book defaming her? Just
because I think the father was responsible more than anything. The father hated her. They met on campus a couple times, and she called him to his face, "Howdy doody." You know, he's a red-headed guy.
Right.
She's a tough cookie, and she didn't take their crap. And the father just hates her.
Yeah. Now, how did you meet her? How did you come to write the book?
Well, the usual phone call from the agent. You know,
okay.
How would you like to do a book on this subject? And I said, yeah, I'd like that a lot. Because, I did Personal Fouls, which was about North Carolina State University, coached by the name of Jim Valvano, who was, at the time, about as corrupt as they came. And, that was a very, very interesting project as well. And it had an interesting ending too, because when that book came out, first of all, they threatened to sue me. Valvano threatened to sue me for $250 million, which was interesting. And my attitude was, I'm telling the truth, you can do whatever you want. But they managed to twist Simon & Schuster's arm hard enough to get them to drop the project. And so I then took the project to a little publisher called Carroll and Graf. And the one promise that Carroll and Graf made me was that they would publish the book as I wrote it and not screw with it. And it got published, and about a week after publication of the book, the chancellor of the university retired. He was the one who had hired Valvano. And about a week after that, Valvano was fired as the athletic director, and he was fired as the coach, because the players who had been so mistreated by him were telling me their story and certainly were telling the truth. And just as in this book, I am 100% convinced that this woman is telling me the truth about what happened to her.
Where, if she already won the money,
yep,
and has been paid,
yep,
what is a publisher afraid of for them to be sued by your book?
You're more than welcome to call these people up on the phone and ask them the question. I mean, I can only think that what may very well have happened is that the father and son, may have somehow put pressure on publishers. I don't know how. And I could be wrong about that. I don't know. I've published a lot of books in my life, and I know a good book when I see one. And this is a very, very interesting book. Her story about what happened to her at the University of Tennessee is interesting in so many ways, having nothing to do with her relationship with Peyton Manning. I mean, she was in on so many things that happened at that place, and they're fascinating. And I was fascinated. And if somebody would publish this thing, everybody would be fascinated.
Now, when they told you that they were afraid of being sued,
nobody really told me anything.
Yeah, okay.
Basically,
how do you word something? How do you word something like that?
Here's how you word something like that. No. Simple as that. The agent sent the book to the publishers, and the publisher comes back and says, I pass. That's all. Simple as that. No. That's what happened.
Okay, because with all that in place, I can't understand how a publisher could be at fault or
at risk.
How they at risk, yes.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I know. I absolutely agree with you. I know. Only that Peyton Manning is a very, very both wealthy and famous athlete, and perhaps these publishers don't, feel like, crossing him. I don't know.
Okay. Now, this has been years. Since then, he has gone on to a great NFL career, and since then, the league is coming down really hard on domestic abuse cases, violence, anything to do with any sort of problems. And why was he never brought up by the Players Union, by anybody in football? Because I'll be honest with you, I'm a casual football fan these days.
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning about. I had no idea these allegations were out there. I had no idea of any of this. How could the Mannings have covered it up to? I mean, it's out there, but it isn't talked about every time the guy plays.
Well, see, the funny thing was the first time the two of them went to court over the sexual abuse, and she got paid the money she got paid from the University of Tennessee, she was under one of those, it's like the Weinstein thing. It's like the Trump thing and Stormy Daniels, where Stormy Daniels signed an agreement that she wouldn't talk about it. Well, Jamie Naughright also was under, this not talking about it as part of the agreement. Same thing.
Okay. Now,
did that
have a shelf life, that agreement?
Well, it would have remained. Nobody ever would have said a word until because it was true of both she and the Mannings. The Mannings also had part of the agreement that they weren't going to talk about it either. And
so
then they wrote that book.
Doesn't that violate the agreement? Right.
It did. Yes, it did, which is why she's able to write about it now.
Okay.
Exactly.
So they did something really stupid.
They did something really stupid. But Archie Manning hated this woman so much that more than anything else, he wanted to do what he could do to get her fired at Florida Southern University. I mean, it's really what they did is
time. In other words, they got her fired the first time. I'm sure that the second job wasn't the job she dreamt of.
She was happy there. She was in charge of training, and she's a professor. She's a PhD. She's a very intelligent person. She had a fine job at Florida Southern, and they did everything they could to get her fired.
Wow
is right.
That just the power of these people get in the way.
Mm-hmm.
It's no different, like you mentioned Weinstein, absolutely no different. A sense of entitlement.
Weinstein or Donald Trump and Stormy Daniels, exactly the same thing. I couldn't help but thinking that the frustration that Stormy Daniels must have had after she was paid $130,000, which was fine, but she was never allowed to tell her story.
How did the Mannings keep it from being a criminal thing initially?
Well, they decided that Jamie decided that she would go. She decided she would have the university pay. The university, she was working for the university. She was a trainer for the university. So she went to the university, and the university paid, rather than make it, specifically against, the college quarterback.
Right. Now, did they agree to pay and keep her at that time, and the Mannings got her fired after that?
That's pretty much so. Yes, she was actually working her last year there as an assistant to the president, believe it or not. And the deal was, of course, where Manning said, I will stay one more year if you will fire her from the university. And what she said was, well, how about sending me to the University of Tennessee in, a different town? Because they've got branches in 3 or 4 other different towns. And the Mannings came back and said, absolutely not. You have to fire her or Peyton is not going to stay his senior year. And so she had to leave. She loved the university, and she had to leave. Whoa.
Would you be kind enough to read us the introduction to the book?
Well, I could do that. All right. I mean, this could be longer than you want it to be, but I'll be happy to.
I love hearing your voice, and
all right.
I think it's a good idea that sometimes the voice gives the feelings where the written word doesn't.
All right. Okay.
So,
well, the introduction is something that I've written, and it's the paragraph that started it all. According to the PBS NewsHour, in the year 2015, there were 124 universities under investigation for sexual harassment and sexual assault on women. The most famous recent sexual assault was perpetrated by the man by the name of Jameis Winston on a woman who sued him in civil court and won. Winston wasn't charged criminally because he was the star quarterback of the Florida State football team. It turned out that the Tallahassee police, whose official stance was that there wasn't enough evidence, never bothered to conduct an investigation into what happened. In Tallahassee, as in most big-time college football towns, star athletes are allowed to get away with most anything short of murder. On February 14th, 2016, the University of Tennessee was hit with a lawsuit brought by 8 women, 7 of whom contended they were sexually assaulted by UT athletes. 5 of the women said they were raped. A 6th said she was assaulted for refusing sex. In the lawsuit, the plaintiffs charged that athletic director Dave Hart and head football coach Butch Jones both knew of the sexual assaults and rapes, but protected their players at the expense of the victims of their crimes. 6 of the athletes were named. No criminal charges were filed against 3 of them. 1 had his charges reduced to misdemeanor assault, and 2 faced rape charges. According to court documents from the lawsuit, on November 16, 2014, a woman called police to say she had been raped by 2 UT football players, Michael Williams and A.J. Johnson. According to those documents, another football player, wide receiver Dre Bowles, saw that she was crying and hyperventilating and came to her aid. After she told Bowles that Williams and Johnson had raped her, he drove her to her apartment and called 911. The victim was taken to a local hospital by ambulance. What happened next is typical of a rampant college culture that protects athletes guilty of sexual assault. The next day, Bowles went to football practice where he told linebacker Kurt Maggot what had happened. According to the court documents, Maggot accused Bowles of trying to fuck up AG and punched him in the mouth for helping the rape victim. After the bloody brawl, Bowles called head coach Butch Jones to tell him what happened, and Jones, according to the lawsuit, told Bones he had betrayed the team. Bowles said he broke down and cried after talking with Jones. The next day, defensive back Geraldo Orta tried to start a fight with Bowles in a campus cafeteria. Where I come from, people get shot for such betrayals, Orta told police. Bowles quit the team and transferred to the University of Chattanooga. Williams was indefinitely suspended and left the team. Johnson played his senior season at UT, was charged with rape in February of 2015, and had his invite to the NFL combo rescinded. The lawsuit brought by the 6 sexual assault victims alleged that the University of Tennessee violated Title IX law in the handling of these cases. It charged that the university, quote, enabled an environment of bad behavior and used a disciplinary system that favored the players, unquote, citing more than a dozen incidents, including ones not previously recorded. The suit was settled in July of 2016. It appeared the university wanted it settled quickly, preventing plaintiffs and witnesses from testifying about the allegations of underage drinking, sexual harassment, assault, armed robbery, and sexual assaults, including incidents that involved women who weren't part of the lawsuit. The settlement of $2.48 million, half to be paid by the athletics department and half by the Knoxville campus, was supposed to put the issue to rest. It was estimated that the university spent an additional $5.5 million in legal costs fighting the accusations. As part of the settlement, the university admitted no guilt. UT officials said they intend to appoint a Blue Ribbon Commission to review Title IX and sexual assault prevention programs at UT. One of the unintended consequences of the lawsuit was that it reopened a can of worms long thought to be shut. In order to charge that there existed a continuing hostile and discriminatory sexual environment, the plaintiffs in their complaint described an incident from 1996, 20 years earlier, in which Jamie Naughright, the Director of Health and Wellness for the men's athletic program and the first female trainer at UT, reported to the Sexual Assault Crisis Center in Knoxville that one of the UT athletes had deliberately thrust his genitals into her face while she was attending to his injury. She hadn't named the athlete in her report, but it later came out that the player who assaulted her was Peyton Manning, the star quarterback for Tennessee. According to the lawsuit, Mike Rollo, the head UT trainer, tried to cover up the incident by saying that Manning was mooning one of the other players, and Naughright just happened to be nearby when he did that. The mooning story was made up, but it was used by Manning any time he was asked about the incident. Naughwright's claim against Manning and the University of Tennessee was settled in 1997 when the university paid Naughright $300,000 on the condition that she leave the university. Naughright, who earned a doctorate degree in education at Tennessee, was hired as assistant professor and program director of Florida Southern College's athletic training program. Florida Southern is in Lakeland, Florida. The sexual assault on Naughright by Manning would have remained hidden in the past had not Peyton's father, Archie, the former NFL quarterback, blamed her for Peyton losing the Heisman Trophy, awarded to the nation's best college football player. Manning finished a distant second to Michigan defensive back Charles Woodson. The national commentators said the reason was that Manning had lost to Florida 3 times in 3 years. Archie Manning had another explanation. After the local Knoxville newspaper reported Manning's attack on Naughright, UT professors wrote letters to the editor of the Tennessean newspaper saying he didn't deserve to be chosen for the Heisman. When Woodson won a landslide vote, Archie Manning blamed Naughright, the woman Peyton had assaulted. To get back at her, Archie Manning wrote a book with Peyton, and in it he went out of his way to paint Jamie Naughright as someone who was vulgar, profane, and generally unfit to be a member of the human race, when the truth was that she was considered by the other members of the football team, especially the African-American players, as a highly thought-of professional trainer who protected them both from injury and the prejudices endemic to Southern life. Archie Manning, a man who hated to lose, sought to ruin her life by making her unemployable. After defaming her in his book, he then sent the excerpts from the book by mail to Florida Southern College, where Naughright worked. Co-workers saw what he said about her, and they began to shun her. Shortly thereafter, the college assistant athletic director recommended she be fired, and ultimately she was terminated because of the comments in the Manning book. No longer employable as a professor, Naughright sued the Mannings and the publisher HarperCollins, and she obtained a six-figure settlement in mediation. In the settlement, HarperCollins and the Mannings agreed to take the defamatory statements out of the book in future editions. They didn't. Naughwright's defamation lawsuit, filed in 2003, got very little attention in the press. Had nothing more about the 1996 incident been written, Peyton Manning would have continued his Hall of Fame professional career with his squeaky clean image intact. But a day after the Title IX lawsuit was made public in February of 2016, an enterprising reporter by the name of Sean King, in an article in the New York Daily News, wrote a startling story with a headline that blared that Peyton Manning's squeaky clean image was built on lies. In fact, that was the headline of the story. King dredged up the details of Peyton's sexual assault on trainer Naughright that had occurred 20 years earlier. Manning had left the University of Tennessee in 1998. This was 2016. What drove Sean King to act after so many years? It had started with an article King had written comparing the criticism in the press of pro quarterback Cam Newton, who was African American, with the adoring coverage of another pro quarterback, Peyton Manning, who was white, despite a string of incidents of boorish behavior. King saw a racial double standard. In the article, King happened to mention Manning's sexual assault on the UT trainer in 1996 and how the charges had just slid off his back and disappeared. The Nashville attorneys, who represented the Title IX case against the University of Tennessee, uploaded the facts of the case onto the Internet in December of 2015. King and many others had access to the 74-page brief that Naughright had filed. As King sat in an airport in San Francisco, he began to read the transcripts. As he told it, it was as though the Apollo moon landing had been a fictional tale filmed in a Hollywood studio. Peyton Manning is not the Captain America of sports, wrote King. According to these documents, it's all a facade, a well-designed for profit creation, maintained and manicured at all costs. How had all of this been kept secret for so long, he wrote. King noted that the evidence on which he was building his article was first brought to light in an article that had appeared in USA Today in 2003. Written by Mel Antonin, the article was based on the 74 pages of court documents he was reading on Peyton Manning, Archie Manning, the University of Tennessee, and Florida Southern College. The material in those court documents, said King, revealed allegations of a sexual assault scandal, cover-up, and smear campaign of the victim that was so deep, so widespread, and so ugly that it would have rocked the American sports world to its core, said King. Yet USA Today never released those documents for reasons I can't explain. In a response to Antonin's article, wrote King, Christine Brennan wrote an op-ed piece in USA Today critical of Peyton Manning for what he had done. But this was in 2003, years before social media giants like Twitter and Facebook would appear, and nothing more was said about it. King was incensed by what he was reading. Had Facebook and Twitter existed back then, said King, it's doubtful that Peyton would have ever been the swell, jolly, gee-whiz pitchman that Nationwide Insurance, DirecTV, or Papa John's Pizza. As his career winds down, said King, we're left to grapple with the reality that there is credible evidence that Peyton and the Manning family knowingly, willingly, wantonly ruined the good name and career of Dr. Jamie Naughright, a respected scholar, speaker, professor, and trainer of some of the best athletes in the world. After King
May I
Rogers...
interrupt you and ask
Yes.
you something, Peter?
Sure.
Was she an African American?
No.
Okay.
No, she wasn't.
Okay.
And isn't. Wasn't and isn't.
And isn't. Yes, I mean,
No.
she would remain.
She remained. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm almost done. After King wrote his article, out of the blue, a teammate of Peyton Manning's at the University of Tennessee by the name of Greg Johnson asserted that he had been in the room when the mooning incident took place, that he had seen what went on, and that Peyton Manning didn't do what the UT trainer said he did. The only problem with Johnson's story was that those who testified in the defamation lawsuit had already established who witnessed the events, and Greg Johnson was not one of them. Only two athletes beside Manning, Malcolm Saxon and Kevin Horn, were there. Sean King was furious. The astonishing new presence of this star witness is not a slight oversight, he wrote. It's more like a full-blown scandal, and it absolutely fits the M.O. of the Manning family to circulate tall tales about this case when such a thing simply wasn't necessary and will likely cause them brand new problems. Commented King further, we interviewed every single person who was even near that space. Not a single person, including Peyton Manning himself, ever mentioned even a hint that Greg Johnson was in the room that day. I honestly think the lengths they will go to cover this up may now be as big or bigger as the story of what actually happened that day. King, in a subsequent article, brought up another scandal that was circling around Peyton Manning. It was reported that he was being mailed HGH, the human growth hormone, which is an illegal substance for professional football players to take. It was shown that shipments of HGH were coming to his house. Peyton Manning and his wife were receiving the packages, and that he had nothing to do with it. Added King, at what point are we willing to admit that our sports heroes, as amazing as they appear to be in the field and in commercials, function sometimes as a peculiar part of our livid imagination? We want them, sometimes need them, to be greater and better than they may actually really be. Amid all the noise about Manning and what he did to UT trainer Jamie Naughright, a number of media outlets called Naughright to get her side of the story. For 20 years she had kept quiet, but now that the UT lawsuit had been made public, Naughright in this book wants everyone to know what it was like for a woman to come onto campus, join the athletic department as a trainer, and be part of one of the strangest, most corrupt college sports organizations imaginable. The attack on her by Peyton Manning was just one incident among many, many others. Her story says something about Manning, but it says a whole lot more about big-time college sports and how these athletes are coddled and protected in the name of victory. It also says a lot about what happens when a woman tries to break into the male bastion of college sports. Jamie Naughright became part of the jock culture. She became vested in the success of her athletes, and then she was violated by the most famous one of them all. She was an ambitious, smart, and loyal woman who was victimized by a system that didn't seem to have any regard for women. She was defended by the African-American players, who also were discriminated against, as she went up against Whitey, a famed Southern football family, including a father who has lived his life through his three boys and then turned on Peyton's victim after she called out his famous son for questionable, if not criminal, behavior. He tried to crush her like a grape, but somehow she fought back and lived to tell her story. After reading Malice, you may never see college sports in the same light again. Nor should you.
Compelling. Absolutely compelling. Peter, how many times when this was presented to you did you think of the Paterno case, and do you see similarities in terms of cover-up and just our heroes with clay feet and the power that the football program has over the university?
Well, it's interesting. The Paterno case certainly was one of the cases that you think about. Another case you think about was the doctor at the University of Minnesota who treated all of those women Olympic athletes.
Yes.
150 and 40 women were sexually molested by that guy. How much how many cover-ups must have occurred to keep this man doing what he was doing for 25 years?
And how much power these Olympic athletes give up to stay in the program? They must have been scared to testify for fear of being thrown out of the competition.
Well, part of it too, I do think, for those young women, as a lot of them were very young, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, who decided that they would take the sexual abuse in order to stay in the program. These were not 22, 23, 24-year-old girls. These were younger girls. The whole thing is so bizarre, as is the assistant football coach at Penn State, who for 20 years was having sex with young boys in the locker room. And nobody blew the whistle on him, because the success of Penn State football was more important than what was happening to those young boys. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What an age we live in.
Well, I think it's an age that's probably been like that since the turn of the 20th century. I don't know how much has changed. You just don't know. You just know the reporting of it has changed. That's what's changed. And obviously, what happened at Penn State and what happened at the University of Minnesota was just so egregious. This was, here at Tennessee was, a one instant time when the quarterback was so furious at her, because she had taught a course for freshmen when Manning was a freshman. And what happened was, at the end of the class that she was teaching, she had asked each of the players to write a synopsis of what they had learned. And at the end of the day, Manning had copied the paper of the football player sitting next to him, word for word. And she caught him at it. And, at that point, she turned them in, and everybody else involved in athletics said to her, we're not going to do anything about this. And they ripped the thing up, threw it in the garbage can. But Manning...
Because he was Peyton Manning.
Yeah. He was a star quarterback. They're not going to... What are they going to do? Fail him from the course because he cheated? Because no, they weren't going to do it. But Manning held it against.
The most egregious thing that they can do in college is to cheat academically. That absolutely destroys the entire premise that it's not semi-pro.
Well, that's what she was trying to tell the executives in the Tennessee sports department. And basically their attitude is, shut up. Part of her problem was that she often saw violations of what was going on, and a lot of these violations will show up in this book. It's not pretty. It's just very, very interesting. You wonder, how do you keep these players academically eligible when so many of them either don't go to class or they don't give a damn?
Right.
These organizations figure it out. They're very clever in how they keep these players eligible to play the sport.
Yeah, they give them courses like basket weaving and football.
Yeah. Or they have professors who will give them A's and they don't have to go. You've got that. Various and sundry different things. You've got summer school. You go to summer school and you got A's in summer school. And also, of course, if you do something like cheat on the test and somebody calls you on it, you rip up the piece of paper and throw it in the garbage can, as though it never happened. So that's the other thing that happens. And it happened there.
Did she name the people that she went to with this evidence early on?
Absolutely, she does. Yep. She sure does. Yep.
You're going to make some changes in that university.
Could be. You never know. But first I've got to get it published.
Bring her on as a guest. I'd love to hear her story in her words a little bit.
Well, we probably. I imagine we could do that at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Peter, thank you. Your book is compelling. If anybody wants to get a head start on it, you've been publishing a page or two a day
on my Facebook page. Go to my Facebook page. You can. I've written about the first 20 pages over the last 2 weeks, 1 or 2 pages at a time. And you can.
Okay. If you enjoy Peter's reading, please give him Facebook feedback and ask him if you wouldn't, Peter, read the entire book chapter by chapter.
I'm not reading. This is it. This is all you're getting. I'm not reading.
All right.
Anymore.
All right. I'm happy with this.
This is it. This is what you get.
All right.
Anyhow, Ralphie, you have a wonderful week. My pleasure.
You the same, and just keep healthy. That's the main thing.
Yep, I'm doing that. You too.
All right.
Take care.
Keep swinging.
Bye.
Bye, sir. Thank you for listening, everyone. This is the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, Golenbock University. I'm Ralph Tyko. I have the privilege of talking to Peter Golenbock on a regular basis, and believe me, it's a privilege. Thank you for listening, everyone. Adios.